With Donald Trump threatening tariffs over Greenland to European allies, what kind of response does Europe have? And of course, what kind of implications will this have on that transatlantic relationship?
Europe's response to Trump until now has been some combination of appeasement and flattery and wishful thinking that he'll somehow go away if one is sufficiently nice to him. Trump basically pocketed that and doubled down, and now he is uh, projecting indifference to the Western alliance, to the existence of NATO, to any version of alliance with the Europeans. And I observe that they are starting to suspect that maybe a different approach is necessary. You asked Thomas what that could be. It could be many things.
Mm.
Europe has tremendous economic leverage over the U.S. Europe basically purchases over $500 billion of U.S. defense industry production a year via NATO or because of NATO. Europe allows access to many bases militarily to the United States military. The U.S. has access to 27 bases around the world because of NATO. That goes away potentially if NATO ceases to exist or ceases to function as an alliance. NATO also, the only time it ever invoked Article 5 was on behalf of the U.S. after
Mm.
9/11, which freed up U.S. forces to conduct their activities in Afghanistan and Iraq. The U.S. benefits enormously from its trade relations with the EU and from the existence of NATO. The U.S. would benefit hardly at all from owning Greenland, and the entire planet would be impoverished, literally and figuratively, if the rules-based order that basically says I can't just demand a country because I want their minerals were to be thrown into the trash. And in particular, if the fact that the U.S. can act this way it ends up emboldening Russia and Ukraine and the Baltics and Eastern Europe and
Mm.
China and Taiwan, as we suspect it will, then the result could be some early version of World War III, which is not good for the US. This is so maniacally ridiculous that you're finally starting to see the invertebrates in the Republican caucus in the Senate hinting that they may turn on Trump. And there are quiet murmurs, even of a willingness to impeach and convict him, which would require 20 Republican senators to join the Democrats. There's even speculation that at some point the 25th Amendment might be invoked. Now, I think that is very low probability,
Mm.
like one in a million. But in theory, that happens when the cabinet and the vice president decide that the president is, for whatever reason, incapacitated. And it's not likely, but anyone who reads Trump's letter to the Norwegian prime minister yesterday has to wonder if this person is not incapacitated. Because he's basically saying, since your country decided not to give me a Nobel
Yeah.
Prize, and it's not true because Norway does not decide, then I'm no longer interested so much in peace. And now I'm going to take care of what's good and proper for the US as if he hadn't been so far. I mean, this infantile obsession with the Nobel Prize and this total transactionalism about everything is rightly freaking the Europeans out. And the timing is wonderfully convenient because everyone's going to be at Davos, which is a perfect setting for a version of something that happens too rarely, weirdly rarely in this world, which is very clear public diplomacy.
Do you think Donald Trump respects his European allies? Why does he need Greenland that outright ownership? Can't they? Why can't he collaborate with his NATO allies?
I mean, I'm not the Trump whisperer.
Mm.
He probably thinks Greenland is as big as it looks on maps, which is about 10 to 15 times bigger than it really is. Greenland has minerals. I guess he wants them, or at least wants to be seen as a person who gets minerals. This is a person who abducts Nicolas Maduro, a terrible dictator who is rightly out of power. But it's on the edge, such a move to abduct the dictator of another country. You got to be careful to be seen as not having done it as a usurper who's after their oil, which is what he does a few hours later when he says, in justifying this action, we need access to Venezuela's oil. So this is Donald Trump, and he thinks it's kind of cool if he says we need access to the minerals, rare earths in Greenland, which, by the way, are difficult to extract and may not be economical. He's also making up nonsense about how China and Russia are threatening Greenland and are in the seas off Greenland, when in fact they're in the seas off Alaska, which the U.S. does own. It's all just nonsensical, which is why,
Mm.
given how little actual benefit there is in seizing Greenland, because the U.S. already has access to its bases through NATO. All they got to do is ask. There's nothing additional that can be gained by owning it. Given how little that can be gained, and given the tremendous downside of shattering NATO, and remember, every time he says I'm not ruling out force, he's threatening military force on a NATO ally.
Mm.
America's rivals see this and conclude that NATO is a paper tiger at best and perhaps falling apart. And obviously, this is bad for business and bad for security for the U.S. I don't know why he keeps on doing it, but does he respect the Europeans? Plainly, he does not.
Mm.
He thinks they're pushovers, which is why it's probably a good idea on the part of the Europeans to push back, to send a few troops to Greenland as a signal, and to make clear that they won't be pushed around by tariffs, which, by the again, for the millionth time, are attacks on Americans. No
Mm.
country wants all their exports to be taxed because that messes up the global economy and their economy. But the main thing is the people paying whatever additional tariffs are American importers and American consumers.